Jin-Woo Han forced Marcus Avery to kneel in Northgate Galleria's food court, while Marcus's daughter watched with Minho's hand locked around her arm. Two cleaners stood near the escalator, and behind a sealed door, Brian Cho held the hard drive the crew wanted. Jin-Woo ripped the radio from Marcus's shoulder, kicked his flashlight across the tile, and smiled down at the quiet black security guard in the cheap uniform. Mall guards open doors for men with real power, he said. They do not make decisions. Marcus lowered his eyes as if broken, but he had counted 6 men, one shaking trigger finger, the first camera they cut, and a mirrored menu board reflecting the West Service Gate. Then Minho yanked him upright. His shirt split along the ribs, exposing a pale, jagged scar. Daesung Park stopped laughing and stared as if a dead man had returned. Jin-Woo saw the fear, tightened his grip on Zoe, and ordered Marcus to choose who would be hurt first. Marcus took one slow breath. The crew thought kneeling meant surrender, and that mistake had placed every one of them inside his rescue plan. If you enjoy stories where arrogant criminals discover too late that they chose the wrong victim, leave a like, subscribe to Wrong Victim Stories, and tell us what city or state you are watching from. Now let's go back to the moment they made their first mistake. 7 hours earlier, Marcus Avery checked the same aluminum service door for the 3rd time. Routine gave his mind somewhere harmless to go. Northgate Galleria sat outside Chicago, half empty and half converted into an event complex, with a shuttered department store, a small theater, 4 surviving food counters, medical offices, and a ballroom. By day it looked tired. At night it became polished tile, steel gates, dark glass, and long reflections. Marcus preferred it after closing. Crowds tightened his shoulders. Quiet corridors asked simple questions. Was the door locked? Was the stairwell clear? Was the kid by the escalator safe? He wore a uniform one size too loose and a plastic badge that said security in letters larger than his name. At 39, he valued looking ordinary. People underestimated ordinary men, and most nights that felt like peace. Through the ballroom glass, he saw Zoe Avery folding tablecloths after her high school scholarship fundraiser. She was 16 and checking her phone because her ride had canceled. Marcus had told her to wait in the security office. She said it smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, so he told her to stay near the ballroom until he finished locking the east wing. She gave him a mock salute. Then a young man in a blue contractor jacket stepped from a staff hallway, saw Marcus, and immediately stepped back inside. Marcus did not chase him. Frightened people ran harder when chased. The contractor emerged before Marcus reached the door. Korean-American, about 26, thin-faced, with an ID badge clipped backward and a backpack hugged to his chest. His name was Brian Cho. Northgate had hired his company to replace payment terminals, and the logo matched Marcus's work order. Still, Brian kept watching the cameras in the dark concourse. "You closing this wing?" he asked. "Already closed." "Anybody else have access?" "Operations." Brian swallowed. "Which manager?" "Victor Haynes tonight." Marcus asked what was in the bag. Brian said tools, though it sagged like electronics. Marcus told him to use the south exit. "I can't," Brian said, the first honest words out of him. Zoe called that her ride was still 40 minutes away. Marcus turned to answer, and Brian slipped through a fire door into the old department store service passages. Marcus keyed his radio. Victor answered too quickly, insisted Brian was authorized, and told Marcus to stop inventing problems. At the staff door, a green maintenance key tag swung from the lock before someone pulled it through from the other side. Northgate issued green tags only to operations supervisors and engineers. Brian's badge was blue. Marcus asked Victor where he was. "North loading dock." But Victor's channel carried no dock echo, truck noise, or ventilation hum. Only silence. Then the connection ended. By 10:15, the fundraiser had emptied into the parking lot. Teachers carried raffle baskets to their cars. Parents waved from minivans. The ballroom staff rolled banquet tables into storage. Zoe sat on the edge of the dry fountain outside the food court, scrolling through messages and pretending not to watch Marcus make his rounds. Two overnight cleaners, Rosa Delgado and Eli Benton, pushed a supply cart toward the east restrooms. The theater manager pulled his final gate. Marcus checked the camera grid in the security office. Northgate's system was old, its images grainy and slightly delayed, but Marcus knew every angle the way a musician knew a familiar song. Camera 12 watched the south vestibule. Camera 19 caught the west service gate in the reflection of a framed advertisement, even though Victor had once claimed the corridor was invisible. Camera 6 showed the loading dock. Victor was not there. Camera 22, covering the operations hallway, blinked once and went black. 2 seconds later, Camera 11 died. Then, Camera 4. The order was wrong. Anyone who truly understood the mall would have cut 19 first, because its reflection exposed movement toward the west gate. Whoever was shutting down the system had a map, not experience. Marcus lifted the desk phone to call local police, but the line gave him a soft electronic pulse and no dial tone. His radio crackled. Victor's voice said, "Power test. Stay off the channels until I reset." Marcus looked at the monitor where camera 19 still showed the west corridor. 3 men crossed its reflected edge. Dark jackets, gloves. One carried a compact case. Another wore a green maintenance key tag on his belt. Marcus pressed the silent incident button under the desk. Nothing happened. Victor had disabled more than cameras. Marcus opened a lower drawer, took out a ring of ordinary brass keys, and slipped one small key into his sleeve. He did not reach for the heavy flashlight beside the monitor. He did not open the locker at the back of the office. The locker held an old Navy Challenge coin, a folded photograph, and a part of his life he had worked hard to keep behind a thin metal door. Instead, he stepped into the concourse and told Zoe they were leaving. She saw his face and stood without arguing. That frightened him more than if she had asked why. They had taken 4 steps when the west service gate rolled down with a metallic crash. At the same moment, the south vestibule doors clicked locked. The mall was not closing. It was being sealed. The first man appeared beside the pretzel stand. He was broad through the shoulders and walked with the restless energy of someone who preferred a problem he could hit. Min-Ho Lee. Marcus did not know his name yet, but he recognized the type. Minho held his right hand close to his jacket, not because he was calm, but because he wanted everyone to imagine what was under it. A second man emerged by the theater, then 2 more near the escalators. They spread too far apart for a robbery crew and looked past cash registers instead of at them. They were hunting a person. Zoe moved closer to Marcus. He placed himself half a step in front of her. "Security office," he said quietly. She started that way. Min-Ho smiled. "Nobody moves." Marcus kept his hands visible. "Mall's closed." "Then open it. Doors are on a timer." "Not those doors." Min-Ho pointed toward the service wing where Brian had disappeared. The men behind him were already steering Rosa and Eli from the restrooms. Eli's glasses sat crooked. Rosa held one hand against her cheek. Marcus felt the old internal shift, the one he hated because it came without permission. Sound separated into layers. Distance sharpened. He noticed Min-Ho's jacket pulling at the left side, one man's limp, another man's habit of watching Min-Ho before acting. He also noticed the green key tag on the belt of the man near the escalators. Same bright plastic. Wrong belt. The man wore expensive street shoes and had never carried a maintenance radio in his life. Marcus filed the detail away. He asked to speak to whoever was in charge. Min-Ho stepped close enough that Marcus could smell mint gum. "You don't get to ask." A voice from behind the dark coffee kiosk answered, "Let him." Jin-Woo Han walked into view wearing a charcoal overcoat and no gloves. He was not the biggest man in the mall. He did not need to be. Everyone else adjusted when he moved. He looked at Marcus's badge, then at Zoe, and understood the relationship immediately. Marcus Avery, he read, Night Security. His smile held no warmth. You have access to the old anchor store. A contractor went in there. You will bring him out. Marcus said he had not seen anyone. Jin-Woo glanced at Minho. The blow came hard and fast across Marcus's mouth. Zoe shouted. Marcus did not fall. He tasted blood, looked at Jin-Woo, and gave him nothing else. That refusal changed the room. Jin-Woo's smile narrowed. All right, he said. We will teach your daughter what your authority is worth. Marcus knew humiliation was not the objective. It was a tool. Jin-Woo wanted to break the room into watchers and watched, powerful and powerless. If Marcus resisted too soon, Minho would punish Zoe or the cleaners. If Marcus obeyed too quickly, Jin-Woo would move everyone into the service wing, where cameras were dead and exits were controlled. Marcus chose the middle. He let his shoulders drop. He looked toward the floor. He said, Don't touch her. I'll open what you need. Jin-Woo studied him, searching for the moment pride turned into submission. Marcus gave him a picture close enough to believe. They walked toward the food court in a slow procession. Marcus first, Zoe behind him, Rosa and Eli to the side, 6 crew members around them. Dae-Sung Park came last. He was older than the others, thick gray at his temples, with a stillness that did not match Minho's restless aggression. Marcus noticed Dae-Sung checking corners before people. Experience then. Maybe military, maybe criminal work that had lasted long enough to become craft. At the center of the food court, Jin-Woo ordered Marcus to kneel. Zoe said, Dad, don't. The word cut deeper than Minho's hand. Marcus looked at her. It's okay. It was not. But he needed her breathing, listening, waiting. He lowered one knee, then the other. Tile pressed through the cheap fabric of his pants. Jin-Woo took Marcus's radio and let it hang between 2 fingers. This is what they give you so you can pretend someone is listening. He ripped it away and dropped it. Minho kicked the flashlight from Marcus's belt. It spun beneath a table. Rosa flinched. Eli stared at the floor. Zoe's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Jin-Woo liked that. He wanted witnesses. Tell them, he said to Marcus. Tell them what mall guards do. Marcus remained silent. Minho seized the front of his shirt and hauled him partly upright. The seam tore under Marcus's arm and down his ribs. Cold air touched skin. The long scar showed pale against him, a crooked line wrapping from his side toward his back. Dae-Sung saw it. His face emptied. Not surprise. Recognition. Marcus caught the reaction before the older man could hide it. Jin-Woo caught Marcus catching it. For the first time, control slipped by a fraction. You know him? Jin-Woo asked. Dae-Sung answered too slowly. No. Marcus understood then that the scar belonged to more than his memory. Years earlier, the scar had begun with a steel edge in black water and ended beneath white hospital lights. Marcus did not let the memory open fully. Memory was a door that rarely closed politely. He held onto the food court instead. The smell of fryer oil trapped in vents. The broken neon letter above the pizza counter. Zoe's left shoelace untied. Minho's breathing getting faster. Dae-Sung refusing to meet his eyes. Jin-Woo crouched in front of Marcus. Where is Brian Cho? Marcus said, I don't know. Minho struck him again. This time Marcus allowed himself to fall onto one hand. The movement put his face near the tile and gave him a clean line beneath the tables. In the mirrored base of the menu board, he could see Camera 19's corridor reflection. One crewman remained near the west gate. Another moved toward the old department store entrance. The green key tag flashed at his hip. Marcus also saw the faint red indicator on the food court's public address control panel. Victor had disabled the central alarm, but left local maintenance circuits active. Ordinary systems, separate wiring. That mattered. Jin-Woo ordered Marcus up and made him lead them to the anchor store gate. As Marcus stood, Dae-sung stepped backward. Their eyes met. A humid night, a cargo pier, and a terrified woman's face flickered at the edge of Marcus's mind. Dae-sung had been there. Not close enough to share the scar, but close enough to remember it. Marcus said nothing. Silence made recognition grow. Brian was hidden somewhere beyond the gate, likely listening through the hollow corridors. If he stayed still, the crew would find him when they searched room by room. If he ran, they would hear him. Marcus needed time and a message. At the gate keypad, he entered the wrong code once. Minho shoved Zoe forward. Next mistake is hers. Marcus looked at Zoe, then at the keypad. He entered the correct code, but held the final button long enough to trigger a routine maintenance fault. The gate rose 3 feet and stopped. A yellow light began blinking on the panel. Jin-Woo turned on Victor through an earpiece. "Fix it." Victor's voice came faintly through the speaker. Marcus could not hear the words, only the frantic cadence. The insider was inside the building, close enough to access controls but afraid to come near the hostages. That narrowed the possibilities. Marcus bent toward the panel as if examining it and pressed the service call button twice, paused, then once. It was not an alarm. It was a pattern from another life. 2. Pause. 1. Rescue needed. Civilians present. Hold perimeter. Whether anyone outside would understand depended on who heard the maintenance line. Detective Elena Ward heard it at 10:31 p.m. because Northgate's after-hours maintenance service forwarded unresolved calls to a city subcontractor, and the subcontractor routed unusual silence to the police non-emergency desk. Ward was finishing paperwork in a tactical liaison office when the recording reached her. It contained 8 seconds of mall hum, a man's controlled breathing, 2 taps, a pause, 1 tap, and then a quiet sentence. Westgate reflection still alive. Most dispatchers would have classified it as an equipment issue. Ward had spent 6 years coordinating with federal and military rescue teams before joining Chicago area law enforcement. She recognized the rhythm, not as a secret code, but as the kind of compressed phrasing used by people trained to communicate under observation. She called Northgate Security. No answer. She called Victor Haynes. He answered and said the mall was empty, the alarm system was under repair, and a guard had probably mishandled a panel. Ward asked the guard's name. Victor hesitated before saying, "Marcus Avery." She entered the name into a restricted liaison database and found almost nothing, which told her more than a full biography would have. Prior Navy service, special operations assignment sealed behind administrative language, medical separation review, no criminal history, no recent weapons permits. Then she saw an old contact note attached to a joint task force file. Avery, Marcus J., maritime interdiction and hostage recovery. Ward stood, called her supervisor, and ordered patrol units to approach without lights or sirens. She did not tell them to breach. She told them to build distance, control streets, and watch every service exit. Inside the mall, Marcus did not know whether the message had traveled. He only knew Jin-Woo's impatience had increased. The crew forced the gate higher by hand and moved everyone beneath it. Marcus guided Zoe through first, then Rosa and Eli, placing himself last so the metal could not drop on them. Minho noticed. "Still playing hero?" Marcus answered, "Still doing my job." Minho raised his hand, but Jin-Woo stopped him. "No. Let him keep the uniform in his head. It makes the fall longer." Beyond the gate, the old department store smelled of dust and carpet glue. Emergency lights marked a corridor between empty retail floors. Brian was somewhere ahead. Marcus spotted a fresh scrape on a storage door and knew Brian had passed there. He also saw something else, A small black camera clipped above the corridor, new and wireless. Victor had given the crew more than keys. He had given them eyes. Detective Elena Ward heard the maintenance call at 10:31 p.m. because Northgate's unresolved after-hours messages routed through a city service desk. The recording held mall hum, controlled breathing, 2 taps, a pause, 1 tap, and a quiet sentence. Westgate reflection still alive. Ward had coordinated with federal and military rescue teams before becoming a police tactical liaison. She recognized compressed communication from someone speaking under observation. Northgate security did not answer. Victor Haynes did, claiming the mall was empty and a guard had mishandled a panel. He hesitated before naming Marcus Avery. A restricted liaison search returned sparse records. Prior Navy service, sealed special operations language, a medical review, and an old task force note for maritime interdiction and hostage recovery. Ward ordered patrol units in without lights or sirens, then built a quiet perimeter instead of rushing the doors. Inside, Marcus did not know whether anyone had understood. The crew forced the jam gate high enough to move the hostages beneath it. Marcus sent Zoe, Rosa, and Eli first, and went last so the metal could not fall on them. Beyond it, the empty department store smelled of dust and glue. A scrape on a storage door showed Brian had passed. Above the corridor, Marcus spotted a new wireless camera. Victor had given the crew more than keys. He had given them eyes. Brian made his first mistake from behind a fitting room wall. A phone vibrated. Barely a sound, but the empty store amplified it. Min-Ho was away, yet the younger crewman near the stockroom heard. He turned. Marcus saw the decision form and stepped into it. "Electrical relay," he said. "This wing does that when the gate faults." The crewman looked toward the ceiling. Dae-Sung did not. He watched Marcus, knowing it was a lie. For a second, Marcus thought he would expose him. Instead, Dae-Sung said, "Check the panel." The crewman walked the wrong direction. Marcus stored that choice beside the scar reaction. Fear had begun dividing the crew. Jin-Woo gathered everyone near the Central Cosmetics Island, an open area surrounded by mirrored columns. He made Marcus sit on the floor with hands visible, and Zoe kneel beside Min-Ho's empty place marker. A chair turned backward to show where she would be held when he returned. Rosa and Eli were kept together. Their closeness helped them stay steady, but it also made them easy to move. Marcus spoke without looking at them. "When the lights change, stay low and follow Zoe." Rosa's face did not move. Eli gave the smallest nod. Zoe heard too. She whispered, "What lights?" "The ones that change." She looked at him, frightened and angry. "You could have told me." Marcus knew what she meant. Not the lights, the scar. The years before, he became the dad who packed lunches, avoided fireworks, and never talked about the framed photograph hidden in his locker. "I know," he said. She blinked hard. "Are you really what he thinks?" Dae-Sung had moved close enough to hear. Marcus answered, "I'm your father." It was not enough for her, but it was the only identity he trusted in that moment. A crash echoed from deeper in the store. Brian had tried to shift hiding places. Jin-Woo smiled. "There." He sent 2 men toward the sound. Marcus studied the mirrors. Each column gave broken angles into adjacent aisles. Victor's wireless camera covered the main corridor, but not the reflection behind the abandoned perfume counter. A metal service door stood there, painted the same beige as the wall. Marcus knew it led to a narrow passage connecting the anchor store to the ballroom kitchens. The green tag key should open it. The man wearing the tag was 20 feet away. Marcus could not take it yet, but he could make sure Zoe knew the door existed. He turned his head as though checking on her and let his eyes settle on the mirrored column, then the beige seam, then back to her. Zoe followed the look. She did not nod. Good. A visible nod would have killed the idea before it lived. Min-Ho returned carrying the challenge coin between his fingers. He had also found the photograph. Caleb Stone stood beside Marcus on the deck of a gray ship, both younger, both sunburned, both looking as if the world had not yet charged them for confidence. Minho tossed the photograph onto the floor in front of Jin-Woo, the coin he handed over carefully. Dae-sung whispered something in Korean, too low for Marcus to catch, but the name Stone was clear in English. Jin-Woo looked from the coin to Marcus. Navy. Marcus said nothing. Not just Navy, Dae-sung said. His voice had changed. He was there when the Sangkiri route fell. The name opened the full memory. Sangkiri had been the port district. The witness, Lin Dao, had carried ledgers from traffickers and extortion crews who moved people through gambling rooms and freight offices. Marcus remembered smoke above the warehouses, rain moving sideways, Caleb's hand pushing the witness into the rescue craft, and Dae-sung firing from behind a loading crane before disappearing into the dark. Marcus also remembered Dae-sung seeing him cut open by the steel edge and still moving, still carrying one of the captives. The scar was not simply something Dae-sung had seen. It was proof of a night his network had believed impossible. Jin-Woo turned the coin over. And now you check bathroom doors. Now I protect this building. From skateboarders? Jin-Woo laughed, but none of his men joined him. The laughter ended too quickly. Korean gangsters humiliated a black security guard. One scar revealed his Navy SEAL past, Jin-Woo said with bitter amusement, as if imagining the cheap headline that might follow. That is what people would call this, yes. They would make you a legend and me a fool. Marcus finally met his eyes. You can still leave. The offer was real. That made it insulting. Jin-Woo struck him with the coin in his fist. Zoe surged forward, and Minho grabbed her. Marcus stayed seated because moving then would turn fear into gunfire. Blood ran from his eyebrow. Jin-Woo leaned close. You are not running an operation. You are on the floor. Marcus looked past him at the mirrored column. The green key tag had shifted to the belt of the crewman guarding Rosa. Victor was redistributing access through the earpieces, probably preparing a move. Those can both be true, Marcus said. Jin-Woo's face hardened. The coin had changed the balance. The crew no longer saw a powerless guard. They saw a trained man choosing not to act, and the choice frightened them more than action would have. Outside, Ward watched them all through the rain-dark windows of an unmarked command vehicle. Patrol officers had quietly blocked the outer roads. A tactical team held behind the old cinema wall. Fire and medical units waited 2 blocks away. Victor Haynes continued insisting by phone that nothing was wrong. Ward let him talk. People who lied under pressure often filled silence with detail. Victor claimed he was at the north loading dock, then said he was monitoring the ballroom panel, then described a south vestibule alarm that had not existed for 3 years. Ward sent an officer to check Victor's car. It was parked beside the operations entrance, engine warm. She pulled his employment file. Gambling debt. 2 disciplinary warnings. Unexplained after-hours access. The green maintenance tags were logged to Victor and one engineer who was homesick. Ward still lacked eyes inside. Then Camera 19 sent a single corrupted frame to the remote service server. In the reflection of an advertisement, she saw a man in a gray security shirt being moved through the west wing and a flash of green plastic on another man's belt. She enlarged the image until it broke into pixels. Green tag, she said. A Northgate facility supervisor beside her explained what had opened. Operations rooms, ballroom kitchens, service passages, and the old department store connector. Ward marked the routes without directing an assault. Civilians were scattered. Cameras were compromised. A rushed entry could push the crew towards Zoe. She needed Marcus to shape the interior while she shaped the outside, but she had no right to assume he could keep doing that. She sent a maintenance reset ping through the public address system. Inside, one overhead speaker clicked twice, paused, then clicked once. Marcus heard it. So did Dae-sung. though he did not understand. Marcus did. Someone had received the message. The perimeter was holding. Rescue was not coming through the doors yet because he had warned them not to. Jin-Woo heard the clicks and looked up. What was that? Victor spoke quickly through the earpiece. Jin-Woo's expression told Marcus the insider had dismissed it as a system fault. Marcus lowered his gaze again. Humiliation remained useful cover. He asked for water for Zoe. Minho told him to beg. Marcus did. He said, "Please." He kept his voice low. Zoe looked at him with shock, then slowly understood. Every second spent making him perform was a second Brian stayed hidden. Ward learned the building, and the crew's confidence drained into suspicion. Jin-Woo gave Zoe a bottle to prove he controlled mercy. She drank only once and passed it to Rosa. Marcus saw pride flicker in her face, brave and frightened at the same time, exactly as people often were. The situation broke when Brian ran. One of the searchers found his backpack behind a wall panel and shouted. Brian burst from a side aisle, empty-handed, sprinting toward the beige service door. He had left the hard drive somewhere else. Marcus knew it from the way Jin-Woo's eyes went to the backpack instead of Brian. Minho lunged, caught Brian by the jacket, and drove him into a display case. Glass cracked, but held. Brian fought like a terrified civilian, all elbows in panic. Minho dragged him to the center and forced him down beside Marcus. "Where is it?" Jin-Woo asked. Brian stared at the floor. "Gone." "You brought it here." "I copied nothing." "You copied everything." Jin-Woo's voice remained controlled, but Marcus saw his thumb rubbing the edge of Caleb's coin. Panic hiding inside a ritual. Brian had been maintaining payment terminals for private gaming events held in Northgate's ballroom. He had discovered that certain terminals were routing identity data to hidden accounts, and that event invoices matched extortion collections. He copied logs, names, and payments onto an encrypted drive. He had intended to take it to a federal contact, but Victor intercepted an email and sold the information to Jin-Woo. Brian chose them all because he believed its old service passages could hide him until police arrived. He had not known Victor controlled them. Jin-Woo ordered Minho to bring Zoe closer. Marcus stood. Every weapon shifted toward him. He stopped with hands open. "Use me." Jin-Woo smiled. "I am. She doesn't know where the drive is. Neither do you. Then hurting her gains nothing." Jin-Woo stepped forward. "It gains you." Marcus saw the truth. Jin-Woo had stopped treating Zoe as leverage on Brian. She was leverage on Marcus. The reveal of his past had made him the more important opponent. Dae-sung moved near Jin-Woo and whispered, "We should leave. Police will be outside." Jin-Woo said, "You told me he was one man. He is one man who builds rooms around you." Marcus heard it. So did Minho. Fear became anger on Minho's face. He tightened his grip on Zoe. She winced, but did not cry out. "Dad," she said, "don't do what he wants." Jin-Woo's eyes brightened. "Smart girl." Marcus looked at her untied shoelace, the mirrored column, the beige door, the green tag, and the emergency lights. Then he looked at Brian. "Where did you put it?" Brian shook his head. Marcus said, "Not for them." Brian finally met his eyes. "Somewhere the cameras can't see." The answer was partial, but Marcus understood the bigger question. In Northgate, there was only one place Brian would think invisible because Victor had called it invisible, the reflected West Corridor. Victor ordered a relocation. Marcus heard it through the crew's movements before Jin-Woo announced it. Men checked exits. The green tag changed hands again. Rosa and Eli were pulled upright. Jin-Woo planned to move everyone through the ballroom kitchen connector to the North Operations Corridor, then out through a loading bay covered by disabled cameras. He believed Victor had created a blind tunnel, but Camera 19's reflection still exposed part of the route, and Ward had already seen the green tag. Marcus needed to keep the group from becoming a line of hostages in a narrow corridor. Narrow spaces favored whoever controlled the front and rear. Zoe would be trapped between. He began with a small truth. Northgate won't open. Victor snapped through Jin-Woo's earpiece that it would. Marcus said, "The fault at the anchor gate put service locks into stagger mode. Your tag will open the kitchen door, but the loading bay will stay sealed until the local panel cycles." This was not a detailed system trick. It was the kind of irritating behavior old buildings developed after years of partial upgrades. Marcus had seen it twice. Victor had probably forgotten. Jin-Woo sent a man to test the route. That split the crew again. Marcus then turned to Eli. "You need your inhaler?" Eli did not have asthma. He understood after a beat and began breathing badly. Rosa supported him. Minho cursed. Jin-Woo did not want a body slowing the move, so he ordered them seated near the cosmetics island. 2 hostages temporarily removed from relocation. Marcus had reduced the moving group to Zoe, Brian, himself, and 4 crew members. Still dangerous. Better. The test man reported the loading bay sealed. Victor started talking fast. Jin-Woo demanded he come fix it in person. At last, the insider would be forced from his protected room. Marcus saw Dae-sung watching him. "You made that happen," Dae-sung said. "Old building," Marcus replied. "No, you make small things happen until there is no room left." Marcus remembered Caleb saying something similar during training. Rescue is not one brave move. It is 100 ordinary choices made before panic notices. Dae-sung stepped closer. "You think this ends like Sankiri?" "No." "Why not?" Marcus looked at Zoe. "Because I know what I lost there." Dae-sung understood the warning differently from Jin-Woo. Marcus was not promising revenge. He was promising not to repeat the failure. For a frightened criminal, restraint was harder to predict than rage. Victor Haynes entered through the beige service door wearing a Northgate operations jacket over his dress shirt. He looked less like a mastermind than a man who had spent years blaming other people for his own bad decisions. Sweat shone on his forehead. A green master tag hung from a retractable clip at his belt, brighter and newer than the duplicate carried by the crew. Zoe saw it and looked at Marcus. That was the clue completing itself. Victor avoided Marcus's eyes. "The loading panel is damaged," he told Jin-Woo. "I can cycle it from operations, but we need to move now." Jin-Woo held up Caleb's coin. "You said the guard was nobody." Victor stared at it. "He is nobody. He works nights." Dae-sung said, "He was a Navy SEAL." Victor laughed once, then realized no one else was laughing. Marcus watched his face. Victor had known about Brian and the cameras, but not Marcus. His betrayal had been opportunistic, not deeply planned. That meant he would fold under exposure. Marcus said, "Your tag is logged." Victor flinched. The remote server caught camera 19. Another flinch. "Police know which corridor you opened." Jin-Woo struck Victor across the face. "Do they?" Victor looked toward the wireless camera, then toward the beige door, calculating escape. Marcus did not need his answer. Everyone had seen it. The insider was now a liability inside the crew. Jin-Woo ordered him to lead the route anyway. Victor protested that police could be waiting at the loading bay. Jin-Woo grabbed Zoe and placed an arm around her shoulders, using her as a shield from threats he could not see. Minho shoved Brian ahead. Dae-sung guarded Marcus. The group entered the beige passage. Behind them, Rosa began counting under her breath, steadying Eli. Marcus caught her eye before the door closed and glanced toward the local public address switch. She understood only that it mattered. That was enough. The passage was narrow, lined with pipes and old event posters. Emergency lights cast alternating pools of white and shadow. Marcus knew each turn. 20 yards ahead, a mirrored fire cabinet reflected the intersection before anyone reached it. In that reflection, he saw Victor touch his earpiece and angle his body toward a side door. He was planning to abandon the crew at the kitchen junction. Jin-Woo had not noticed. Marcus had. More importantly, Zoe had followed Marcus's earlier lesson and was watching reflections instead of faces. She saw Victor too. Ward's team picked up the movement through camera 19's surviving reflection. It showed only fragments. Victor's green tag, Zoe's white fundraiser sweater, Marcus's torn gray shirt, then darkness. Ward directed officers toward the north exterior, but kept them behind cover. The service supervisor told her the beige connector divided at the ballroom kitchen. One branch reached operations, one reached the ballroom, and one reached an old freight corridor ending near the loading bay. Victor's master tag could open all three. Ward transmitted a building-wide text command to any active digital sign. Fire inspection mode. Most screens were dead, but a small event schedule panel in the ballroom kitchen changed from blue to amber. Inside the passage, Marcus saw the amber glow before the others did. It meant the outside team had access to the sign network. He also saw the fire cabinet mirror catch Minho's hand shifting toward his jacket, while Zoe was still against Jin-Woo. The group was reaching the kitchen junction. Decisions were compressing. Marcus could not wait for a perfect moment, because perfect moments were stories people told after surviving imperfect ones. He needed separation, light change, and civilian movement, but not chaos. As Victor reached the junction, Zoe stumbled deliberately on her untied shoelace. Jin-Woo tightened his hold and looked down. At the same instant, Rosa, back in the store, pressed the public address switch Marcus had shown her. A feedback tone screamed through the old department store and the kitchen speakers. Eli pulled the local breaker handle marked for event lighting, thinking it was the switch Marcus meant. The result was not darkness. It was better. The bright kitchen work lights died, while red emergency strips came on along the floor. Shadows shifted. Reflections deepened. The crew looked up. Victor bolted for the operations branch. Minho spun toward the sound. Marcus moved, not with spectacle, but with exact purpose. He pulled Zoe out of Jin-Woo's loosened arm and guided her behind the concrete corner. Dae-sung reached for Marcus, then hesitated at the scar and lost the second he needed. Brian dropped flat as Marcus had told the others. Jin-Woo grabbed air, then Caleb's coin slipped from his hand and struck the tile. The tiny metallic sound seemed louder than the alarm tone. Marcus had Zoe behind cover. That was the first objective. The second was preventing Minho from firing into panic. Marcus closed the distance, redirected Minho into the kitchen doorframe, and trapped his arm long enough for the weapon to fall away. He kicked it under a rolling rack, not toward himself. Rescue, not revenge. Evidence, not possession. The balance changed, but it did not settle. One crewman seized Brian by the collar and dragged him toward the freight corridor. Jin-Woo recovered and ran after them, shouting for Victor to open the loading bay. Dae-sung backed toward the wall, staring at Marcus as though the past had filled the passage. Minho fought free of the doorframe and came at Marcus with raw fury. The old instinct offered Marcus a dozen ways to end the threat. He chose the one that kept Minho between him and the wall, away from Zoe. They collided against a prep table. Pans crashed. Zoe crawled toward Brian's dropped backpack, then stopped when Marcus said, "Corner." She obeyed, pulling herself behind the concrete return. Marcus absorbed a blow, turned Minho's momentum, and sent him sprawling across the rubber kitchen mat. No flourish, no punishment. Minho tried to rise and slipped on scattered utensils. Dae-sung could have attacked Marcus from behind. Instead, he said, "Jin-Woo is taking the girl." Marcus turned. Zoe was no longer in the corner. During the struggle, Jin-Woo had doubled back through the shadow, caught her by the wrist, and pulled her into the freight corridor. Brian was ahead with the other crewmen. The major complication landed all at once. both central hostages moving toward the compromised exit, Victor loose with the master tag, and Minho still dangerous behind. Marcus's chest tightened around the old scar. For one brutal instant, the corridor became the warehouse at Sankiri. Caleb was shouting that 2 captives remained. Water was climbing the steps. The rescue craft was leaving. Marcus had chosen the witness, trusting Caleb to follow. Caleb never did. The memory tried to turn the present into guilt before the outcome had happened. Marcus pressed his palm once against the scar and forced himself back into the kitchen. Zoe was alive. Brian was alive. Find the living. He looked at Dae-sung. Which way will Jin-Woo go? Dae-sung answered, Loading bay. Victor will abandon him at the operations door. Yes. Then help Minho stay down. Dae-sung stared. You trust me? No. Marcus pointed to the red emergency strip leading toward the freight corridor. I trust what you're afraid of. He left before Dae-sung could decide whether that was mercy or threat. Marcus did not sprint blindly. He moved fast enough to close distance and slow enough to read each intersection. The freight corridor ran behind the ballroom stage, crossed a service ramp, and reached the loading bay through a cage gate. Reflections came from stainless steel doors, frame safety glass, and puddles left by a leaking pipe. In the first reflection, he saw Brian being pushed. In the second, he saw Zoe walking beside Jin-Woo, chin raised despite his hand at the back of her neck. In the third, he saw no Victor. That absence confirmed the operations branch. Marcus pressed a wall phone as he passed and said only, Green tag moving operations. Freight corridor occupied. 2 civilians. Ward heard the call through the maintenance bridge. Copy, she said, though Marcus had already released the receiver. She moved one team to contain operations and another to hold the loading bay from outside. No one entered the freight corridor. They understood that Marcus was still shaping the interior. Ahead, the crewman with Brian reached the cage gate and swiped a duplicate green tag. Red light. Victor had not activated it. Jin-Woo shouted into his earpiece. Victor did not answer. Betrayal became visible. Brian used the moment to twist free, but the crewman caught him again and slammed him against the cage. Zoe drove her heel down on Jin-Woo's foot and ducked. It was brave and dangerous. Jin-Woo grabbed the back of her sweater before she could run. Marcus reached the service ramp. Jin-Woo saw him and raised his weapon toward Zoe's side. Stop. Marcus stopped. The crewman held Brian near the gate. The loading bay beyond was dark. Police waited outside, but Marcus could not see them. He could see the convex safety mirror above the ramp, and in that mirror, a side door behind Jin-Woo. The operations route joined the freight corridor there. Victor was approaching, believing he could slip through unnoticed. The master green tag bounced at his belt. Marcus looked directly at Jin-Woo to keep his attention. Victor sold you a blind exit, he said. There are no blind exits in a building full of glass. Jin-Woo's eyes flicked toward the mirror despite himself. He saw Victor. Rage replaced calculation. Victor froze in the doorway. The crewman holding Brian turned too. 3 points of control broke at once. Ward's containment officer saw Victor through the operations door window and ordered him down. Victor ran the wrong direction, straight into the freight corridor, hands rising only after laser dots appeared on the wall near him. The officers did not fire. They shouted clear commands from cover. Victor dropped, the green tag skidding across the concrete. Brian kicked it away from the crewman and sent it beneath the cage gate. On the outside, an officer hooked it with a reach tool and passed it to Ward. The physical evidence linked Victor to the access route before he could invent another story. Jin-Woo pulled Zoe backward and aimed toward the police voices. Marcus stepped sideways, forcing Jin-Woo to keep adjusting. Look at me, Marcus said. You wanted me on my knees. You wanted everyone watching. Now they are. Jin-Woo's breathing changed. The controlled leader in the overcoat was disappearing. leaving a frightened man surrounded by failed plans. "You think the uniform makes you lawful?" he asked. "No." "The Navy coin? The scar?" "No." Marcus kept moving 1 inch at a time, never enough to trigger the shot, always enough to improve Zoe's angle toward cover. "Then what makes you better than me?" Marcus looked at Zoe, then Brian, then the officers holding their fire because civilians were close. "What I choose next." Jin-Woo understood. Marcus had every reason to hate him. The scar connected him to the network that killed Caleb. Zoe had been threatened, Marcus beaten and humiliated. Yet Marcus was not closing in for revenge. He was creating a surrender. That choice stripped Jin-Woo of the story he needed, the one where violence proved all men were the same underneath. Jin-Woo jerked Zoe tighter. She gasped. Marcus saw the challenge coin protruding from Jin-Woo's fist. Jin-Woo had picked it up in the kitchen. Caleb's words faced outward. "Find the living." Marcus said, "Zoe, left on the bell." She did not know what bell. Neither did Jin-Woo. But above the loading cage hung an old dock alarm connected to the gate cycle. Outside, Ward used Victor's master tag. The cage motor engaged. A warning bell rang once. Zoe dropped left. Marcus moved at the same moment, catching Jin-Woo's weapon arm and turning it away from her. The shot struck the concrete ceiling, showering dust. Officers surged through the opening only after Zoe cleared the line. Brian pulled her behind the ramp wall. Marcus drove Jin-Woo against the cage and held him there until Ward reached them. He did not strike him after the weapon fell. He did not whisper a threat. He simply said, "Hands where they can see them." Min-ho arrived from the kitchen at the worst possible second, dragging Dae-sung by the jacket and carrying a metal utility knife. Dae-sung had tried to stop him and paid for it with blood at his lip. Min-ho saw Jin-Woo pinned, police entering, and the entire hierarchy collapse. He charged toward Zoe instead of toward escape. Marcus released Jin-Woo towards officers and stepped into Min-ho's path. The collision carried both men into the rolling cage. Min-ho slashed wildly. The blade caught Marcus's already torn shirt and opened fabric beside the old scar without cutting deep. Dae-sung shouted, "That scar is why we lost Sang-kiri." The words froze Jin-Woo more effectively than handcuffs. Everyone heard the meaning now. Dae-sung pointed at Marcus, voice shaking. "He carried the witness out after the steel cut him. Stone held the warehouse. Our people said both were dead. Then the ledgers reached court." Jin-Woo stared at the scar, at the officers, at the green tag in Ward's gloved hand. The past he had treated as distant legend was standing in front of him wearing a cheap security shirt. Min-ho attacked again. Marcus caught his wrist, turned him into the cage, and held him until 2 officers secured him. No crushing blow, no cinematic execution, just control. Min-ho screamed that Marcus was hiding behind police. Marcus answered, "I brought them to the right door." Ward looked toward Dae-sung. "Get on the ground." He obeyed immediately. The remaining crew members in the old store heard the police commands over their earpieces and tried separate exits, only to find gates locked by the same staggered system Victor had misunderstood. Rosa and Eli stayed low until officers reached them. One man surrendered near the cosmetics island. Another attempted to blend into the ballroom storage crew, but the wireless camera and green tag logs placed him with the group. Within minutes, the mall that had seemed sealed around the hostages became sealed around the criminals. Marcus remained beside Zoe while paramedics checked her wrist. She gripped his hand with both of hers. Brian sat against the wall, shaking so hard he could not hold the cup of water an officer gave him. Marcus took it, held it steady, and let Brian drink. Only when both young people were safe did he allow a medic to examine his ribs. The hard drive was not in the reflected west corridor after all. Brian had hidden it inside the hollow base of the advertisement, whose glass created camera 19's reflection. He chose the spot because no camera pointed directly at it, but the reflection kept the corridor visible. Marcus had been right about the location for the wrong reason, and that detail helped investigators understand how close the crew had come. Ward recovered the drive under Brian's direction. She photographed it in place, preserved the surrounding prints, and documented Victor's access logs before anyone touched the operations console. Marcus watched from a folding chair while a medic closed the small cut near his scar. Evidence preservation mattered because rescue without consequence left predators free to choose new rooms. Brian's drive contained financial records, victim identities, payment chains, event schedules, and communications linking Jin-Woo's crew to illegal gambling, extortion, and identity theft. It did not provide a magic answer. It provided patient proof. Federal investigators would spend months verifying it. Victims would need protection. Cases would move slowly. Justice was not a sunrise montage. It was paperwork, testimony, sealed warrants, frightened people telling the truth twice because the first recording failed. Marcus understood that kind of endurance. Victor began cooperating before midnight. He admitted selling camera blind spots and key access to cover gambling debts, then claimed he never expected violence. Ward told him expectation did not unlock the doors. He did. Dae-sung asked for an attorney and later offered information about the old trafficking network. Minho refused to speak. Jin-Woo sat in a patrol vehicle with Caleb's coin sealed in an evidence bag on the hood outside. He kept looking at Marcus through the glass. The public dominance he had staged in the food court had reversed without a crowd cheering. Rosa gave a statement. Eli apologized for pulling the wrong breaker. Marcus told him it had been the right light. Zoe heard that and laughed once through tears, the first warm sound in the mall since the gates came down. Then she looked at Marcus's bandaged side and stopped. "Caleb," she said. Marcus had not told her the name, but Dae-sung had. "He was your friend?" "My brother, in the way some people become." "Did you leave because he died?" Marcus looked toward the loading bay where dawn had begun to pale the concrete. "I left because I thought surviving meant I had taken his place." Zoe squeezed his hand. "Tonight, you took your own place." In the following weeks, Northgate became evidence before it became a mall again. The old department store stayed behind police tape, while contractors replaced cameras and access panels. Brian entered protection after turning over credentials and explaining the records. Rosa and Eli returned on the same shift. Victor was charged for the access, conspiracy, and hostage plot. Jin-Woo, Minho, Dae-sung, and the others faced kidnapping, assault, weapons, extortion, and organized crime cases, with federal counts growing from the drive. Dae-sung's cooperation reopened parts of the Sankiri investigation. Ward told Marcus only one personal fact. Lin Dao, the witness he and Caleb rescued, had survived and built a quiet life. She also knew Caleb went back for the chain captives. The fuller record showed Caleb freed 2 people, sent them toward the rescue route, and stayed behind to delay the escape team. Both captives lived. Marcus read the report after Zoe went to bed and held it until sunrise. Grief did not leave, but it changed shape. Caleb's last act was no longer only a death Marcus had failed to prevent. It was a rescue completed at terrible cost. A scar could remember pain without being owned by it. Northgate reopened a month later. Marcus returned in a new gray uniform that fit properly. The mall offered him a supervisor title and a raise. He accepted the raise and declined the larger office because he wanted to keep walking the building. On his first night back, he checked the south vestibule, the ballroom kitchen, and the west service door. On the third pass, he stopped himself, marked the lock secure, and moved on. Zoe arrived with dinner. She no longer treated the security badge as the full measure of him, but she did not ask for war stories. She teased his burned coffee, enrolled in first aid, and began noticing exits in crowded rooms. Marcus told her awareness helped only when fear did not choose the route. In the repaired security office, he opened his locker. Caleb's photograph remained inside. Beneath it, Marcus placed the return challenge coin with its words facing outward. Find the living. For years he had hidden it because it accused him. Now it instructed him. Zoe stood at the door. You okay? Marcus touched the coin. Get in there. Down the hall, a skateboard clattered near the escalator. Marcus closed the locker but did not lock it. People tried to simplify the night. They said a gang underestimated a guard, a former Navy SEAL defeated armed criminals, and a scar gave him away. True, but incomplete. Marcus saved Zoe and Brian not by becoming the man he used to be, but by using what that life had taught him. He did not confuse speed with timing or anger with purpose. He noticed a camera cut in the wrong order, a forgotten reflection, Dae-sung's fear, Jin-Woo's panic, Zoe following his eyes, and a green maintenance key tag on the wrong belt. He used humiliation as cover because dignity could wait and lives could not. He trusted Ward to hold the outside, Zoe to move on one bell, Rosa and Eli to read a glance, and even Dae-sung's fear to slow Minho. Rescue was the room changing around men who believed they controlled it. Jin-Woo had measured Marcus by his uniform, silence, job title, and skin. He believed restraint meant submission, because he had never possessed enough restraint to recognize it. They humiliated him because they saw a black security guard they could break. By sunrise, Jin-Woo Han understood that Marcus Avery's scar was not a weakness. It was a warning.